I'm going to pull up my screen and share our slides, and then we'll get going in just about a minute. I should definitely be smoother with my screen share after all this time, but still not quite there. And yeah, we are live on YouTube for this one. The ones previous, we didn't go live just because we had some issues sharing a meeting live because we're doing a meeting versus a webinar. But we are, I think that was Richard who said that in the chat box. We are live on YouTube with this right now too. All right, Carl. So here we are, day 3. I'm sorry, guys, a cat just crawled onto my lap. Here we are, day 3 of our habits workshop. Again, if you're here, thank you. And we love when you share this stuff on social and, you know, just talk about what you're seeing from your end. So please do that little selfie with the computer and send us an Instagram story. Tag at OPEX Fitness and then at Hardwick Carl and at Coach Georgia Smith. So guys, day 3, we are getting in. So Carl is going to talk about some more long-term. Can you guys hear me still?
You're breaking up just a little bit.
Dude, that was my cat.
I can roll from here though, Georgia, if that's easier.
Yeah, you take it, Carl.
Okay, cool. So yeah, guys, I'll try to be sub 10 minutes just to open it up for discussion so we can spend a full 19 minutes just kind of going back and forth here. But I do think it's beneficial to recap where we're at and how we got here. So over the past couple days, we've gotten a lot done, right? Like if you guys actually got into those worksheets, we've solidified our purpose. We've identified and aligned our priorities to our purpose. We've identified our strengths and weaknesses. We've decided what strengths we want to continue to make stronger. We called that etching your niche yesterday. And we've decided what weaknesses we will fill versus not spend time on at all. So I think that was probably the biggest takeaway from yesterday is just understanding where you should or should not spend your time. Because I think we do fall into that trap of thinking we have to be really good at everything instead of just being okay with not being the best at everything across the board. And then remember, we talked about there are some benefits in being a generalist, right? Like I know I'm looking at least 5 business owners on this screen where it's like, you have to be a generalist. You have to understand how to manage your money. You have to understand how to acquire clients. You have to understand how to coach clients, right? So it is beneficial to be a generalist. So I'm not saying don't be that, but eventually you have to etch your niche. You have to focus in on 1 or 2 big things. And that's where we're at. That's where we are today. So we're going to talk about reverse engineering our big objectives. So how do we do that? So I think it's beneficial to first think about what are your big audacious goals, or what is your big audacious goal? And when you start to think about that, you know, that can be aligned directly with your purpose, or not, right? It may just bring you closer to your purpose. So I think it's beneficial to take some time and step back and say, okay, this is my purpose, but what are my tangible goals? Right? And remember, tangible goals don't have to be something that you can score. It's just like, hey, I want to continue to move toward this thing. So identify those. And that's where I would start. After you identify those, you have to now reverse engineer, right? It's like, how are you going to reach those goals? And we're all coaches on this call, right? We all design training programs. It's the same thing, right? It's like, think about that big macro cycle, right? That can be a year, 4 years, 10 years. Think about that, right? Let's kind of truncate that a little bit, right? I like to look at these things in quarters. That's just kind of how my brain works. Like my brain literally resets every three months for some reason. But I like to break those things down into quarters, especially when we're thinking about how do we build really good habits and how do we build a really efficient and effective daily schedule. I think when we start looking like at big audacious goals and purpose and stuff like that, and we're like, okay, what do I do on a daily basis to get there, it just becomes a little bit too overwhelming. So I like to break those things down into quarters. Quarters are long enough to pivot if needed, but short enough to stay very, very focused. And I think that's what's most important, is to stay focused and don't lose what some would call motivation, right? And to kind of hit that reset button every 3 months, I find to be extremely beneficial. So we have to start big and we have to get more specific, just like we do in program design. So Georgia, can you hit the next slide, please? Thanks. So what I wanted to do here is just give you guys an example of what your big objectives could look like. I didn't want to put mine here because they may just be so far off from what you guys are doing on a daily basis. I wanted to try to connect with what you guys are doing in your coaching practice. So I just put, 5 quarterly objectives that could fall on any one of your guys' laps, right? So number 1, I want to acquire 15 new clients. I want to retain 96% plus of my current clients. I want to complete my OPEX CCP final project. I want to update my client onboarding process. So I want to systematize that thing. And I want to read 6 books, right? And maybe that was just in my head because we're talking about books. So those are the big objectives that I want to get through this quarter, right? So that's where I'm starting, right? There's a lot of things that go into accomplishing each one of those objectives, but those are more just broad level. I can look at this thing going into next quarter. So I put Q1 2021 here. So starting in January. So I can look at this thing going into Q2 2021 and look at, okay, what did I accomplish? What did I not accomplish? And what do I just need to move forward into the next quarter because something else may have come up? And it's funny because here at OPEX, it's like we did this last year, right? Like we have our yearly goals, we have our quarterly goals. We got into Q2 and this thing totally looked different, right? Because that was when COVID like hit us really hard. And we're like, wow, the landscape is just different. We have to kind of pivot our goals. We didn't pivot what we do on a daily basis, but we had to pivot what our objectives were on a day-to-day basis. So break your year into smaller chunks, right? That's what the quarter is doing. Ensure your objectives, and I underline mostly, and I put mostly intentionally. Ensure your objectives mostly align with your purpose and goals, right? There's some things, guys, that we just need to get done, right? Like we need to pay our bills. We need to spend time with our families. We need to do things that may not align with like our number one purpose or may not align with our big audacious goal, but they're things that we just have to get done. And we'll hit on like calendar management and stuff like that when we get into the dailies. I think that's tomorrow, actually, when we get into the daily objectives. But it needs to mostly align. It doesn't have to 100% align with your purpose and your audacious goal. So this is what we want you guys to do tonight or today, depending on where you are. We want you to go away from here and we want you to think about, what are you doing next quarter? Not next year as a whole, but what are you doing next quarter to get closer to your purpose? And write down those bigger things, right? And, use common sense, right? It's like, don't put something on this list that you can get done in an hour, right? Like these should be fairly large objectives that you can spread out over a 3-month period. Georgia, you want to hit the next one here? Thanks. So now we go into monthlies, right? So we start big and then we go small, right? So we want to break our quarterly objectives into chunks, right? So obviously we have 3 months inside of a quarter, and I would recommend that you take it 1 month at a time, right? Like we have our big quarterly goals, but we don't have to plan granularly what January, February, and March are going to look like specifically, right? There's some things that I can just like go across the board, and we'll hit that in a second, but let's take this thing 1 month at a time because we have to be okay with pivoting. We have to be okay with pivoting. And again, ensure that these align with your quarterly objectives, right? So if you find yourself putting some things in your monthly objectives that don't align with your quarterly objectives, revisit your quarterlies and think about, do you need to add things there? Do you need to take things away that you realize as you go through this practice just aren't as important? So there's some things where it's like, in my quarterly objectives, I was like, I want to acquire 15 new clients, right? So I'm gonna approach this very sustainably, right? I'm gonna acquire 5 new clients a month. Remember, I wanted to acquire those clients, but I can't just say I'm going to do it. Like, what am I going to do it? Right. So I'm going to refresh my website with new client testimonials, right? Because I have this marketing play in my brain, and I'm going to spread that marketing play out over 3 months, and testimonials and showing my client success is a part of that marketing play. So I'm going to do that in January. I'm going to ensure that 90% plus of my clients attend their monthly consultation, not just book it, but attend their monthly consultation. Because remember, I had the goal of retaining 96+% of my current clients outside of adding 15 net new. So I have to start thinking about in my head, what do I have to do to retain clients? Having conversations with them is probably the first thing that should come to your mind, right? So I want to ensure that 9 out of 10 of my clients are attending their monthly consults. I want to read 2 books this month. I want to remember, because I wanted to systematize my onboarding process. I wanted to make that really clean and clear, and I wanted to make my process a lot more efficient. So in January, I'm going to schedule demos with CRM systems and purchase a CRM system so I can start systematizing my coaching practice. So realize I'm not putting everything in January. It's like, okay, this is a starting point. I need to accomplish this objective over these next 3 quarters. How can I break that one objective into 3, 4, 5 different pieces so I can set myself up the best way I know how to accomplish those things? And then I'm going to find 3 more clients for my OPEX CCP final project, because I already have 2 good to go. And then finally, we get to weekly objectives. So just like the monthlies, right? We want to break these objectives into chunks, right? We want to take it 1 week at a time, because I think everyone on this call can empathize with, next week might look a lot different than this week. We might be thinking a lot differently next week than we are this week, based on what's happening right now, or some pivots that we have to make in our coaching practice. And we have to ensure, again, that they align with our quarterly and monthly objectives. So just look at this as me just getting more specific, right? So this week, so this is week 1 of January. What am I doing? I'm getting 3 new client testimonials. I'm reading 3 times this week. I'm sending 5 video messages to clients. Remember what we talked about? It's like, what are the granular things that I can do to increase retention? I'm building my new landing page framework for my testimonials page. And I'm identifying my final clients, right? So start thinking about the cadence in which we're going to develop these objectives, guys. So quarterlies, we need to be thinking about that stuff right now. Today, you guys need to be thinking about, what do you want to do next year, right? What do you want to do in Q1 of 2021? And that's going to take some time, right? You have to look back at your purpose. You have to look back at your priorities. You have to look at, what you're capable of doing next year. And you have to think about those things, right? Leading into January, now you have to think about, okay, how do I reverse engineer what I want to get done this quarter, and what needs to be done in month 1 of this quarter? Then when you get to December 31st, right? Or I don't know what the first Monday in January is. Sorry, guys. When you get to whatever that first Monday in January is, now you're in it, right? You're like, okay, these are the things, these are the objectives that I want to get done this week. And then you write all those things down. And then it's Monday, right? So now you're going to ask, and I'm getting ahead of myself because we're going to dig into this tomorrow, but now you're like, okay, what do I need to do today on Monday? So I won't dig any more into dailies, because I'll leave that for tomorrow, but you can start to think about what your cadence will be as you develop these things. And you have to start thinking about, when do you do this? When we said, like, prioritize your priorities, is creating really efficient habits, is that even a priority for you? Because if it's not, guess what's not going to be on your calendar? Time to do this stuff. And I'm not going to say, like, oh yeah, this takes like 30 seconds to do. Like, this stuff takes some time, right? On the front end, really building your purpose, priorities, and your quarterly objectives, that takes time. But once you get into like week 2, 3, 4 of January, like you're rolling, right? This is 5 minutes a day that you're spending doing these things. And when you end each day, you feel really good because you know that you're doing the things that you need to do to move closer to whatever your goals are. So I'm not gonna spoil anything and hit any dailies right now, but that's where it gets really interesting to me, right? Is when you guys can start to understand what actions you can take on a daily basis to move you guys closer to your goals, right? So I will end it there. I blew it. I went 15 minutes. Apologize.
We will allow it, Carl. We'll forgive you for those extra 5 minutes, I promise. So guys, we will get into some general questions and answers around this objectives worksheet that you're going to go and do, and then just anything more broadly around habits that's on your mind today. Carl, while they're thinking of some questions to put forward, I know for me, the hard part of this stuff, like it sounds so good in theory, and I'm so excited by the idea of planning my objectives for the year, for the quarter, for the month, for the week. But then when it comes to the actual doing of it and making it happen, that's the challenge. Do you have any advice for making sure this stuff actually happens?
Yeah, I think the old practice of having accountability partners or an accountability team is something that's really cool, right? It's like I indirectly have that, and I think that helps me a ton, right? Where it's like, I have Georgia, I have Megan Sweet, I have, other mentors that are outside of OPEX that I talk to on a weekly basis. I'm on with Jason Crow from Precision Nutrition. I'm on with him every 2 weeks, right? And those are like my accountability partners where I tell them things that I want to do and what my goals are, and they ask me about those things often, right? It's like, where are we at on this? Right? So, it's easy to say something inside of our own brains and say, I'm going to do this, and then talk ourselves out of doing it because it's hard to hold yourself accountable. It just is. Some of us can do that, right? It's like some of us have that personality type where we're like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it 100% of the time. But most of us aren't like that. It's really easy to make excuses inside of our own brains. So I think accountability partners, Georgia, or an accountability team is a good idea for most people.
Thanks for that, Carl. Nicole, I'm Australian, not American. And guys, jump in, ask your questions. Like, don't be shy. Come on mic and say your piece.
I'll say something to add to that comment, if you don't mind, Carl, is if you find that you're not getting stuff done, it's possible that you're saying you're going to do too much. So look at what you can take off of your list and figure out and go back to those priorities, right? Like reground yourself in the priorities. So I find for me, if I'm not getting a lot of stuff done, I probably need to just take something off of my list. And if you're someone who doesn't know yourself to, like Carl said, I know if I'm going to say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. If you don't know yourself to be that way, then try to remove as much as possible and go back to one thing, get that done. Another thing, get that done. It's like building reps and building confidence and training. It's the same thing. So sometimes you have to go back a few steps to go back up and be more high performing.
Yeah, it's funny too, guys, right? Because I think we all have those people in our lives that always say, I don't have time to do that, or I don't have time to do this. And that just blows my mind when I hear some people say that, because when you ask them like, well, what are you doing on a daily basis? And you actually start to talk through that stuff. It's like, you're not really doing much, right? Like you're not doing anything. You're just so unorganized. A lot of your day is spent figuring out what you should do next. And that's all this is, right? It's like, it's being a more organized person. That's it. Right. Like we talked about it on day one, but it's like, what is a habit? Like, what is a habit? Right? A habit starts with a choice to do something. And then that choice turns into a behavior if you act on it. That behavior is intentional. So if you're doing something intentionally, it's not yet a habit. right? When you guys wake up, well, I think most of us, when we wake up, do we have to think about brushing our teeth? Probably not, right? It's just a habit. It's like built into us. It's like our brains are wired. We like go here, we go pee, some of us go poop, and then we go over here, and then we brush our teeth, right? It's like, that's just what we do. That's a habit. That's not an intentional behavior. We're not putting brushing my teeth in your GCal, right? That's not in your calendar. So it's a choice, and then it's an intentional behavior. And then you do that over and over and over and over and over again. It's just a habit. It's second nature. You just do it.
I wanted to add something to what Megan was saying. I've been working for myself, or being like, whatever you call it when you're your own boss, being your own manager, for most of the last 20 years. And I think what I noticed is it's similar to like, if you're writing programs for your clients, you have to have really good alignment that they actually want to do the program. And alignment's a really important thing with your own objectives. If you're writing down quarterly objectives, monthly objectives, or daily objectives that you don't really care about, things that you have a lot of trepidation about doing, you don't really like doing, then they're not going to be effective. They're just going to be like an intimidating, incomplete to-do list. So like doing this exercise effectively means really aligning yourself and your intentions properly as well.
What scares you guys about this portion of like sitting down and like planning your, let's just call it quarter out at this point? What scares you guys, or where do you not feel comfortable doing something like this?
Hey, Carl, how's it going?
Good. Hey, what's up, David?
Hey, I just wanted to chime in on that question. I think the scariest part is the didactic method of just writing it out, and people not making it organic. I had this conversation with one of my coaches, and she was just telling me about how people perceive her body, or better yet, people perceive the physical and translate it into coaching efficacy. And so we were going back to square one and getting talking about her getting herself together as far as the being better and being more into shape and more conscious of her nutrition. And the conversation was so organic. I wish I could have recorded it for her, because me and her just labeled, we went through about 5 different variations of things, and then we spoke on them and broke them down. And it was so organic, and for her to get that information was very rewarding. And I think if individuals would do would just have a conversation with somebody else, put the recorder on, and kind of make the conversation more organic, it would be easier to identify and to kind of like just start you on your path. And just like Megan said, it would be just a one by one thing. Thank you.
It'd be cool, man. It'd be cool if you guys all connected, right? And we talk about accountability partners and stuff like that. It's like you guys have conversations. It's like, what are you doing in your coaching practice, right? It's like, what are your barriers? What are your struggles, right? It's like, what are your big goals, right? Because I do agree, man. Like talking those things out, that's super beneficial. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just want to, if I could add on to that, I think that is the scariest part, is that when you're by yourself in your own little sphere, coming up with big, lofty goals can feel very overwhelming. And so that's the scary part for me, is like visioning out 3, 6, maybe even a year out. I tend to be very small in my vision. And it's only when I talk to other people who can see me and my value that it starts to become a bigger goal. But I have a really hard time doing that on my own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But my head immediately goes to, there might be something behind that though, right? Because we should be able to have those conversations with ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I still do think it's extremely beneficial to have a sounding board. I think that's very beneficial. But we should be able to sit down and think about, what do I want to do over the next 3 months, right? Like, what is my purpose? What are my goals, right? Like, think selfishly. Like, if everything was created equal and my decisions didn't affect anyone else, what do I really want, right? And there's some really good stuff that can come out of thinking like that. Like, what do I want, And for some of us, you know, what we want might also benefit other people, right? Or what we want is to please other people. And I think some of us are just wired that way. But I think it's beneficial to just think about, in a very selfish way, what do I want?
Yeah. And I was going to say, Lacey, I know for me, like sometimes making a goal or putting something on paper is scary. Like if I've gotten my heart broken before and I like really put everything into it. And I can think even just like being an athlete and just really wanting to go to the games and then this whole season just slipping from my fingers. You know, I didn't want to make another fitness goal for years. I had to like grieve that first. So I don't know if that helps, but there might be like something there that just you need to revisit that's blocking you from wanting to get hurt again.
Yeah, and I believe in that adage of, you know, when you do fall on your face and you do fail, those are really great opportunities to learn something about yourself, right? It's like, you know, that's why we assess, right? We assess. So we do things, we come up with this action plan, we execute on those things, we decide, was that beneficial or not, or did that work or not? We assess that thing, and then we come up with another action plan, right? Everything's cyclical. Like, I don't think that, you know, for some of us, I don't think that we'll ever be 100% pleased with what we did in the past 3 months. It's like, okay, how do I get better? How do I up level that? Or if we shot way too high, it's like, what did we learn from that? Right? Like, were my expectations for myself just way too high and there's nothing I could have done to reach those? It's like, okay, you learn to, what Megan said 10 minutes ago, like, take some things off your plate. Don't try to do too many things, right? That's a part of it, right? Figuring out what that goalpost is. That's a part of this thing. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that a lot, right? Where I'm like, ooh, I want to do this. And I'm like, this is like right here. And I come like way far away from this. And I'm like, ooh, was that from a lack of trying, or did I just set the goalpost a little bit too far?
Yeah, I feel as well, Carl, just it's not really a question, but just a statement. Recently, I think we overlooked the fact that all good coaches have coaches themselves. And I think if people get caught in a rut and trying to figure out what they want to do, it's so good to just get in contact with a coach outside of your circle to get their point of view on it. And they can help you find those goals that you might be overlooking yourself.
Yep, agreed.
So I also wanted to chime in because what Megan said about not overloading your plate is super important. I think you also need to recognize how to delegate tasks that you don't necessarily need to do yourself so that you can focus on the more important thing, like the $1,000 task versus the $10 task. So I guess you also have to organize your workload so that you can delegate certain things that you specifically don't need to do, so you can focus on the big goals.
Hi, Carl. I believe we lack in our systems, and that's something that we constantly have to reassess and learning, and to have this, like, to me, when I say coach, is more like you are a coach is the eternal student to me, right? So assess and learning process, that's the essence of what I believe is a coach. So if it's okay with it, but you are on that, it's like you are on the point to be there. Like, I'm still learning and I'm still having a lesson, but I'm moving forward. It's kind of the curve on the, like the challenge and the grow line, that the challenge and the support. You have the mastermind equipe, the mastermind team. Maybe it's your family, because you are starting just your journey on the coaching and you just have one client, or maybe is 20 clients, or maybe you are doing now you're doing like a hybrid method because the circumstances that we have now. So we are adjusting all the time. That's what I believe helped me to do my coaching practice, but also like the learning that I acquired on the maybe past 5 years, allow me to do better as me, as a human, as Zeus, right? So this is like, to me, the essence. That's my essence for this.
Yeah.
Obviously, the systems, we have to try to do better because we don't know how to use all the technology. But we are in a good mastermind, which is a really good mastermind. And if we believe in us and us like a person and like all together, we are gonna find a way to help each other in this journey that we are all together, which is coaching, helping us each other. I don't know. But thank you all.
Yeah, thanks,
the last
Sue.
2 days.
Yeah,
Indeed.
I agree. I think just to kind of wrap that up really quick, Zeus, I'm with you, man. I think what you're saying is that we need to systematize. We need to systematize wherever possible, but systematizing doesn't always have to do with technology, right? Like what we're talking about right now, we're talking about systematizing the way that we go about our daily behaviors, right? And we don't have to have a CRM for that. We don't have to have, the fanciest MacBook for that. It's just like we just need to systematize our actions and what we're doing daily.
So guys, we will wrap up the
kind
day
of that
here.
to me.
So
Okay.
Zeus, we gotta wrap up now, but we will be back tomorrow. Carl is going to be getting into the specifics around managing your day and really thinking about how can we take these quarterly, monthly, weekly objectives and make sure that our behaviors on a daily basis are actually leading us towards them. So really looking forward to that one and to seeing you guys all tomorrow.
Yep. And then just really quick, expectations for today. Yeah, guys, just get off, hit on the quarterlies, hit on the monthlies, hit on the weeklies. If you want to take a stab at the dailies, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. It might give you better context coming into tomorrow, but tomorrow is all about dailies and actually building really good habits. And then we'll wrap it up on Friday with kind of a wrapping a bow on all the things that we talked about and getting into, how do you actually implement these things on a day-to-day basis, quarter-by-quarter basis, year-by-year basis.
And thank you to everyone who shared today. We really appreciate it.
We should have made these an hour, Georgia.
I know, next time. Now we know. 30 minutes goes fast.